Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your co-host, Shaq. We're going to be talking UFC 249, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. And Shaq, it's going down this Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida. Two of the most exciting fighters in the history of the lightweight division. 17 combined performance bonuses between them two. I have a feeling it's going to be all action this Saturday in Jacksonville.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anytime these guys come into the cage, you gotta watch their must-see fighters. Tony Ferguson, one of the most exciting guys to ever do it, a 12-fight win streak. Beat some former champions along the way. And Gaethje, ever since he got signed to the UFC, it's just been straight, fight of the nights, performance of the nights. He definitely proved that signing was worth it. So I'm excited. It's been a while since we had fights, and let's get into it.
Yes, sir. Let's get right down to business. Before we do, got to let you know it's MaxBet season at Best Fight Picks. Use that promo code Dan for 10% off. Use that promo code Shaq for 10% off. Or use that promo code 2020 for 20% off the VIPs. And Shaq, let's get right down to business, because first up, in the 205-pound division, we got Ryan Spann. He's 17-5, and Smiling Sam Alvey is 33-13. Currently, they got Ryan Spann minus 420. The comeback on Sam Alvey is plus 335. Well, Shaq, I'm going to tell you off the rip that I couldn't have been more wrong about this kid, Ryan Spann. You remember his Contender Series fight. Obviously, things didn't go his way. Got knocked out really quick. And then goes to the regional scene, wins his fight against Alex Nicholson, knocks him out in the first round officially. But he was almost knocked out himself, and it seemed like Alex Nicholson punched himself out. And at that point, I was like, man, it's never going to pan out for Ryan Spann in the UFC. And boy, was I wrong, because this guy, I keep forgetting, he's just a kid. He's only 28 years old, but he's got massive physical tools, 6'5" with the 82-inch reach. And I've been very impressed with what this kid's been doing lately. The guillotine choke is absolutely nasty. His presence inside the cage, the striking's getting better. You saw him blast double Nogueira, so I'm very impressed with Ryan Spann. And with Smiling Sam Alvey, it's the same thing it's always been, He's not necessarily known for his footwork or his speed or anything like that, but what he is known for is that veteran experience. And you start to, put your chin up in the air, you think it's some kind of joke. I mean, he's been known to spark some people unconscious and launch them flying through the cage. So, if Ryan Spann hasn't been taking this seriously, he could get knocked out. But I do think he's the rightful favorite here. I think he's got too much for Sam in terms of the physical department. I think the line might be a little wide, but I am going with Ryan Spann here to get a fourth win in a row, Shaq.
Yeah, I think, he pretty much hit it. Alvey, I think he was a little bit of an overachiever coming off the tough show. He kind of made it farther than a lot of people thought. Had some good upset knockouts back in the day over, Cesar Ferreira, a couple other good ones. I just think he hasn't evolved along the years. And to be honest, man, I think it's kind of getting worse as of late. His last few fights, he got his leg folded back against Nogueira, and where, he got knocked out by a 40-year-old that Ryan Spann finished in the first round. And I don't like to use MMA math, but then, we follow that up with the Cruz fight in which he got stopped. And, it's just the way he's been acting lately, man. He's acting like, these are early stoppages or whatnot. And then the Klidson fight, I mean, he did the same thing like you always did. You backed up too much, you didn't throw enough, and then he's, all of a sudden he's shocked that he lost the decision, man. I just think he hasn't caught up with the times. This is Spann's fight for the taking. In my opinion, Spann's easiest fight in his UFC tenure. I think he should come out here and capitalize on this deteriorating chin of Alvey. Alvey was known for his chin, but I just think Spann, is too big and a very underrated ground game as well. I think he's got double-digit submissions as well. So I like Spann to come out here and run through Alvey. And I'm just not convinced Alvey's, UFC level, material anymore, man. He just hasn't evolved.
And that's a funny point you bring up about that Klidson fight. Like, he literally acted like he was highway robbed at gunpoint. It was unlike anything I've ever seen before, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the only time he's done that either, man. The Elias fight, he did that as well. I mean, bro, you didn't throw enough. Why are you sitting here acting all shocked? And the Cruz, he's acting like the Cruz fight was an early stoppage. I mean, bro, you were face down on the camera, but hey,
Yeah, they get in there, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you, man. But next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Charles Rosa, he's 12-3, and Bryce Mitchell, he's 12-0. Currently, they got Bryce Mitchell minus 155. The comeback on Charles Rosa is plus 135. So this is interesting, man, because I'll be honest with you, and I could be way off here, but I haven't been that impressed with Bryce Mitchell. Like, I love the kid's personality. I love the fact that, he's a good old boy from Arkansas, is asking for a camo on the Reebok shorts. I like the kid a lot. I like that he won his last fight by Twister, but when I watch him, I'm like, man, he got finished by Brad Katona, had a 50-50 fight with Tyler Diamond, a 50-50 fight with Bobby Moffitt, and then he submitted a 1-2 opponent that missed weight by 5 pounds with a twister. It was beautiful to see. But, when people are calling this guy a future top 10 guy, I say, let's draw the line. Because I was calling guys like Sodiq Yusuff and Calvin Kattar future top 10 guys before they were ranked. So, Bryce, we'll see what happens. He could prove me wrong. Now, as far as Charles Rosa is concerned, he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but he's not exactly known against, for his speed, his footwork, anything like that. He's tough. He's Boston strong. And, if Bryce Mitchell makes some rookie mistakes, that's where Charles Rosa could capitalize. It might be a dog or pass situation. I'll slightly lean with Bryce Mitchell because of the athleticism, the youth, and things among those lines, but it would not surprise me at all if Rosa came out here and got the upset.
Yeah, I think Bryce is, the whole top 10 thing. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch. You know, I think he's got some glaring holes in his game, and I think that later on it will be exposed. I mean, you saw the Diamond fight; he got 10-8 that last round, and that Bobby Moffitt fight. I mean, man, Bobby Moffitt pulled a big stun in that fight because he honestly had that fight won, but he got his back taken with like a minute left in the fight. And it's kind of a similar pattern in Bryce's fights. He comes out hard in that first round with his jiu-jitsu storm, and then he kind of hits a wall and fatigues out. And his striking's developing, so he's still not there yet. I just don't think Rosa's necessarily the guy to expose it. I mean, like you said, Rosa's a tough guy. Reminds me a lot of Theodoro. Flailing all over the place, tough kid. But I just don't think he's the guy. I could be wrong, because there is some glaring holes in Mitchell's game. But man, I just think that Rosa hits soft. I think that his last fight he was getting smashed on by Bermudez. But Bermudez, he's been hanging out with Grisby too much, man. He's been, he's out here. He's missing weight at 55s. The kid's gone completely off his rocker now. And I mean that armbar he pulled off, is nice, but I don't think you're going to see too many things like that happen consistently in his fights. And so I'm going to go with Mitchell as well. I could be wrong, but I just, this amount of people betting on a guy like Rosa, who I still think is a little washed up, is somewhat alarming to me. So I'm going to take Mitchell. I think he gets the job done just by being younger, fresher. And, he's young, man. I think that some of these issues in his game could definitely, be improved over time. So, as where Rosa, I think, is definitely a finished product. I don't see him getting any better. Some people are under the illusion he was up 2 rounds against Burgos, but I mean, the fight I saw Shane walking him down the entire time. So I'm gonna go with Mitchell here by I'm gonna say late finish.
Yeah, I mean, those same people were the ones saying that Yair Rodriguez robbed Charles Rosa of a decision in Mexico. So, people will say anything. But on the topic of Manny Bermudez, dude, just let me know when that Manny Bermudez versus Ray Borg 265-pound catchweight fight happens, because I'm all in. But next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Vicente Luque, he's 17-7, and Niko the hybrid Price is 14-3. Currently, they got Vicente Luque minus 290. The comeback on Niko Price is plus 245. Well, Shaq, look, this is a rematch. First time they fought, Vicente Luque walked through Niko Price. I mean, the only success Niko had in that fight was he did pop his head back with a few jabs. I mean, we know Vicente loves to block punches with his face. But if you just watch the first fight, that minus 290 is warranted. The only thing I'm worried about is that Vicente has been taking a lot of damage his last few fights. And Niko, it's still good old Niko, but he seems like he's getting more comfortable inside the octagon. You think Niko can come out here, get the upset, and avenge his loss to Vicente?
Yeah, the line is pretty wide. Vicente Luque, man, I've always had a feeling he was a little overrated. I think when I say overrated, I just mean that in the terms of, back in a few months ago when everyone was saying he was a top 10 guy, I thought that was a little bit of a stretch. But, Vicente definitely schooled him the first time. I feel like Both guys have grown a little bit, but man, minus 290. I think that they're banking on this first round KO, and Vicente definitely, has better boxing prowess while he's fresh and more agile. Niko's, got two right feet. He's slow. He gets hit a lot. But man, if this fight goes to the second round, you kind of got to be holding your breath, man. I feel like Luque's got very suspect cardio, and like you said, he's been taking a lot of damage. And with some of these Brazilian guys, man, sometimes they can age overnight, so you got to be very careful. I think that Niko Price may not necessarily make him exert all that energy just because, in comparison to a Leon Edwards or a Wonder Boy. Those guys are going to be moving around constantly, and you see Vicente chasing them around the cage, or for example, a Barberina. But if he get a similar situation where he tees off on Price and can't necessarily get him out of there in that first round, I mean, Luque's cardio worries me a lot, man. I definitely think he's the better fighter, and I love Niko Price as a fan. But man, defensively speaking, even his fight with Vic, I mean, it was kind of ugly, man. It's not pretty with Niko Price. He gets hit a lot. He makes a lot of mistakes, so he's definitely a liability to get knocked out. Surprisingly, his original fight before this whole thing went down was Muslim Salikov, which I thought was like one of the worst style matchups for him. Now he's got Luque. And I think it might possibly be a good time to fight Luque. So I do think this line could be aligned a little bit closer, but I still think Luque is the better fighter. I think that if he learned the lessons that he should have in that Wonder Boy fight, and works on that cardio, put some miles in, that he should come out here and land the harder shots throughout the 3 rounds, or probably get a knockout. So I'm gonna go with Luque for the win, but we'll see. His cardio worries me.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the cardio. What worries me most is the striking defense. The guy just loves blocking punches with his face, and it's going to catch up to you. I mean, you saw the Mike Perry fight was too close for many people's likings. In the Wonder Boy fight, man, that second and third round was really uncomfortable to watch how many shots he was taking. And with Niko Price, like I said, it's always been the same thing, but he's definitely putting on more size. He feels more confident inside the octagon. And one fight I want to refer back to is that Jeff Neal fight, because unlike Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal doesn't really block punches with his face. Jeff Neal's got amazing footwork. He's an elusive guy, super fast. And Niko was still able to create that chaos in that Jeff Neal fight. Now, granted, he lost, but he did knock down Jeff at one point in that fight. So I'm not counting out Niko Price. I do think this is a dog or pass situation. I'm going to lean with Vicente based on the fact that we've seen them fight before and it wasn't even close. But I would be very careful at the betting window. Now, next up in the 185-pound division, we got a matchup between Ronaldo Jacare Souza. He's 26-8, and Uriah Hall is 15-9. Currently, they got Jacare Souza minus 135, and the comeback on Uriah Hall is plus 115. Well, Shaq, if this fight was happening a few years ago and you told me Jacare was, slightly favored, but not by much, I would be like, dude, it's max bet season. But the thing is, he is 40 years old. However, he's still a very tough guy. You can't count out a guy like Jacare, but with Uriah Hall, a lot of people say that he's been coming into his own now that he's at Fortis MMA. I do think he's been looking good, but at the same token, his last 2 wins, not to discredit them, they were great wins, but he was getting beat by Bavon the entire time until he landed the kill blow. And against Carlos Jr., he got his back taken for 8 minutes of the fight. So I was kind of wondering what happens if Jacare gets on his back. It could be one takedown the fight shortly after. But at space, that's where Jacare needs to watch out. So you think Uriah Hall's going to get the biggest win of his career?
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting fights in my opinion, man. It's like you said, if you would have said, a couple of years back that Jacare is only minus 130 against Hall, I mean, he would take that all day, and he'd go out here and probably get the win. The thing I'm struggling with this fight is Hall is one of these guys where, like maybe 5-7 years ago, we all thought he was going to be a world champion, this and that. And the whole Fortis thing, yeah, he's only been at Fortis for one fight. And, he was a big underdog to Carlos Jr., so I will give him props on that one. I'll get into that later. But, I think that Jacare is washed up, man. I'm watching, I watch his fights, and I just, and Yeah, he's got the name value and he's got the wins over Brunson, who's knocked out Hall, and I just feel like Hall's one of these guys where how he fights is, kind of, he's one of the few guys where it's kind of based on his personal life and what he's got going on outside the cage. I felt for like the longest time this guy was a gym hopper. He was at Rain, he was at Extreme Couture, he was with Chill, and I just feel like he's never really had any stable grounds. And what I really think, what kind of changed all in a sense was that big weight cut thing. I forget who. Man, who was it that was back there with him? But I heard some guys talking about it with Lynch, James Lynch, and they were saying, man, it was scary. Like Hall, was pretty much dying in the sauna, and I think that was a big wake up call for him to kind of get his act together. So ever since that happened, I think he fought Jocko, Paulo Costa, Bavon Lewis, and these and quit face. I mean, Shoe Face Jr. And I think that. I think it is somewhat progressing in the right direction. I mean, I just think that if Hall's life is good on the outside, then we can, more than likely see some good fighting skills. And I think the difference was with the Carlos Jr. fight, like you said, most of Hall's fights that he wins, I mean, he gets his ass beat for the most part. And then, these guys get a little bit tired and then he uses that timing and they knocks him out. But the Carlos Jr. fight, man, he came out right away, took that center of the cage and was putting it on Carlos Jr. And a hot take with this whole if Jacare gets on top of him and I've always felt like Hall has underrated jiu-jitsu, man. He's never been subbed in his career. And a hot take is I know I ain't no jiu-jitsu expert, and I know that Jacare's in terms of competition jiu-jitsu, I can't exactly say who has more medals between him and Carlos Jr., but just a hot take. I wouldn't, I think there's a case to be made that Carlos Jr., in terms of MMA jiu-jitsu and in terms of MMA grappling, might be a little bit more of a threat than Jacare. I feel like that Jacare, when we really look at the guys that he subbed in the UFC, we're talking about Chris Camozzi twice, bum, Tim Bosch, these guys have been submitted multiple times. But then other
Musasi.
time, you said who?
Musasi.
Yeah, Musasi. I mean, Hall knocked out Musasi too. But I think that I don't want to say his ground game's a little overrated, but I think in MMA, man, he's more of he likes to charge forward. He likes to use his size and strength to corner these guys and get a lot of knockouts. And I just think that, man, if he tries that game plan with Hall, it's gonna backfire here. And when he's seen him try to implement those game plans, like the Gastelum fight, where he comes out and he has Gastelum fully mounted. Gastelum got submitted by Chris Weidman. He comes out there, he has him fully mounted, and then, he tries to rush things. And when that doesn't work, man, I see a guy that just completely falls down. And I think that if he has to go through any type of adversity in this fight, I don't think he's going to win. I think that at his age right now, he's very, like, when we're talking about a guy that got rocked by, Chris Weidman, and no offense to Chris Weidman, former champion and this and that, but, and I mean, Chris Weidman ain't known for his boxing, and Jack Hermanson also rocked him, and Jack Hermanson ain't known for his boxing as well. I think if Hall hits him with those type of shots, man, he's going to get knocked out. Of course, Jacare, he better get the submission early, but, man, if he's banking on that, I personally think his best chance is to try to corner Uriah and get an early knockout. But, man, I think this is a possible trap fight. I get it. I think, the line's low. Jacare Hall, name value versus a guy that's been inconsistent. But, man, I like the headspace Hall's in. I think he's going to come out here and knock Jacare out and get the biggest win of his career, or one of the biggest wins of his career. I just think that, people are putting too much emphasis on him going to split with Blachowicz. I personally, I feel like if that fight's in Vegas, it's 4-1 Jan. His fight before that was against Hermanson, and going into that fight, if people were like, "There's no way Jacare loses to fucking Jack Hermanson," and what happened? He got fucking outclassed, and people say, "Oh, well, Hall's nowhere near the level of Jack." I disagree, man, because I think that Hall has the skills, has a well-rounded skill set. It's just that his personal life on the outside has never been now he's training with people that actually care about him, man. He's got a new best friend in Spann. Sometimes people need to be in situations like that. And I thought his performance against Paulo Costa, even though he hit the canvas hard, man, I actually thought it was a good performance. I thought he hit him with a lot of jabs. He even hit him with a nice double leg. I think it was a good performance to move forward on. And, he took out Bavon Lewis, who at the time, I mean, bro, just between you and me, Uriah Hall is the reason why Bavon has looked like shit ever since then. You know what I'm saying? Uriah Hall pretty much ended that kid's confidence, man. So I think that Hall's going to come out here and get a knockout win. Of course, Jacare is Jacare, but I just don't think he's going to submit him, man. I think that if that's what people are banking on, I think it's Hall's never been submitted, man. So we'll see, but I'm gonna go with Hall by knockout.
Very compelling case for Hall. It's interesting, man, because Jacare is obviously known for his jiu-jitsu, but I feel like his boxing is very underrated too. I said Jacare is known for his jiu-jitsu, but the boxing is underrated too. You've seen him go out there and knock people out before. Don't sleep on his head movement either. But at the same time, he is getting up there in age, and we've seen in that Jan Blachowicz fight. Now, there were things I liked and there were things I didn't like. I didn't like the fact that when the takedowns weren't working, then all of a sudden he does the gas Brazilian, and then he starts flopping to his back. And you start doing that here, it's gonna be issues. But one thing I did like, however, was that as soon as the bell rang, he went in and tried to shoot for a takedown, pinned him up against the fence. Now, granted, Jan Blachowicz has come a long way in his takedown defense. You remember the first Corey Anderson fight, and then look at him now. The guy really patched up all these holes in his game. But if Jacare comes out here and with the same game plan tries to take Hall down off the bat, I think he might have success doing so. It's just when they get in space, that's when he needs to watch out for, the one big shot, the straight right, the spin kick to the head, all these things. So while the knockout is certainly a possibility for Hall, I'm going to say Jacare's got more paths to victory, and I will take him here to win this fight. Next up in the strawweight division, we got a matchup between Carla Esparza, she's 15-6, and Michelle the Karate Hottie Waterson is 17-7. Currently, they got Carla Esparza minus 155. The comeback on Michelle Waterson is plus 135. Well, Shaq, it's an interesting matchup. I kind of thought it was going to be a pick'em. It seems like there's a little bit of juice on Carla Esparza. You agree with this line, or you think it should be a little tighter?
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. I was a little bit surprised myself to see some of the conviction in Esparza throughout the few weeks, especially coming off the last fight. I mean, I thought she won that fight, but I mean, I don't, I think Esparza's a tough chick. But man, I've kind of had to learn my lesson with Waterson in the past as well in situations like this. With these slight chalk lines going against her. I mean, she's got a good history in spots like this, man. I think Esparza's gritty. Probably a little bit grittier, but I think, man, Waterson has really good tactics. I do think Esparza's improved, but I don't think she's improved to the extent that people, are saying. I think yeah, she's added a right hand to her game, but I mean, I think that Waterson has very underrated wrestling. I think that Waterson, can frustrate her on the outside with the side kicks, and if Carla, likes to rush forward with that little sidestep thing that she does, and I think it's a recipe for her to get head and arm thrown. And I mean, Carla gets taken down a lot in her fights, man. So man, I think this is a typical, female strawweight fight that's going to be 1-1 going into the third round. But man, I'm gonna go with Waterson just based on the fact that, man, I think that she can really frustrate Esparza on the outside. Get off to a good start. Kind of like a little weasel job here, man. I like Esparza, but this, like, when you look at Waterson's history in spots like this, she usually comes through. I just think that she's gonna frustrate her with that movement, that lateral movement, the head kicks, and like I said, I think she's got underrated wrestling herself. Esparza's tough. She's gritty, so it wouldn't surprise me if she eked out the win either. But in fights like this, where I think it's going to be 1-1 going into the third, or maybe even Waterson gets up 2 rounds and loses the third round, I'm gonna go with the underdog here, man. I'm gonna go with Karate Hottie. I think that she's got more tricks up her sleeve, and not to mention, man, I know that Karate Hottie's training never got interrupted. I know they got the gym at the crib, so I think that Waterson's gonna come out here, do her thing, and I feel like Waterson was looking the best she ever had, but hey, man, she lost to Joanna and Jacek. Joanna's top 2 or 3 still, in my opinion. So I think that Waterson is getting undervalued here, like she typically does in a lot of her fights. So I'm gonna go with Waterson.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one, man. Solely for the fact that I also think this fight should be a pick 'em. And so, with that being said, you got to go with the dog odds if you were to make a bet on this. Also, everyone was acting like Alexa Grasso got robbed her last fight, and all the same people are picking Carla here. Now, look, Carla has definitely improved her boxing. The takedowns have always been on point. With Michelle Waterson, it's the sidekick, the head and arm throw. I mean, I just see this being a very close fight. So, in situations like that, I'll lean towards the dog, and we'll see what happens. Now, next up in the heavyweight division, we got a matchup between Fabricio Werdum, the former heavyweight champion. He's 23-8, and Aleksei the Boa Constrictor Oleinik is 58-13. Currently, they got Fabricio Werdum minus 330. The comeback on Aleksei Oleinik is plus 270. Shaq, it's interesting because both guys are known for their jiu-jitsu. They got very different styles of jiu-jitsu. I mean, Aleksei Oleinik is known for going out there in schoolyard headlocking these guys. He did it to Mirko Krokop back in the day. And Fabricio Werdum has the historic submissions over Kane, over Fedor, back when they were both champions. Coming off a bit of a suspension, you think these two are going to stand and trade until one man falls, or do you think we will see the amazing ground game of both?
Yeah, man, it's an interesting fight because Fabricio's coming off the suspension, but man, obviously it's heavyweight. Alexi can never count a guy like him out, and I do think it's lined a little wide, but I still got to pick Fabricio, man. He's the better striker. Alexi is reckless out in space and makes a ton of mistakes. I'll never forget that Overeem fight, man. I don't know what the fuck that was, but Fabricio Verdun, you just got to be careful, man, because sometimes you know with guys like him coming off, how many steroid suspensions? Is this his first one or his second one? First one, but he's been a steroid user his whole career. But you just got to be careful sometimes, man, because it's heavyweight. But I think Fabricio should come out here and get the win. He's the better striker. But man, towards the end of Fabricio's last stint, man, the Tybura fight, I really wasn't that impressed with. I mean, pretty much Fabricio made everyone think Tybura had some potential, and then the Volkov fight. I mean, he kind of went on a mini suicide mission right there. So, I think that I'll pick Verdum, to come out here and probably capitalize on one of Alexi's mistakes. And we know that he's got the ground game to deal with Alexi's 50. So how many submissions? 40, 50?
Yeah, like 52 off the top of my head.
52 submissions. But I'm going to go with Verdum. But I do think it should be, a little bit closer to where it opened at.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight, and Werdum's a wild man. As soon as the ref says go, this guy runs across the cage, usually throws jumping side kicks to the face, knock guys out with flying knees before. Obviously, his Muay Thai is on point. You've seen the work he's done with Master Rafael Cordero throughout the years, so I really feel like he's improved that part of his game. I mean, that performance, that championship-winning effort against Cain Velasquez, he fucked his ass up in that Thai clinch and then, capitalized on a takedown attempt with the guillotine. And with Aleksei, I think his path to victory in this fight is not the Ezekiel choke, is not the schoolyard headlock. It's got to be an overhand right, a left hook. He's got to go out there and touch the chin of Werdum if he wants to win this fight. But I think his chin is going to get touched first. So I'm actually going to go with Fabricio Werdum here to win this fight inside the distance. Now, main event of the prelims, we got a rematch between Donald Cowboy Cerrone, he's 36-14, and Anthony Showtime Pettis is 22-10. Currently, they got Anthony Showtime Pettis minus 135. The comeback on Donald Cerrone is plus 115. Well, Shaq, This is the rematch. Firstly, the kind of shape Pettis used to be in 2013 when they fought the first time, man, dude was glowing. He just looked untouchable. Nowadays, my boy Showtime's got a gut, especially at 170, and he'll always be an incredibly talented guy, but it just ain't the same guy as the world champion with the 18-2 record, jumping off the cage, kicking Benson Henderson's head into the fifth row. What Pettis accomplished in the sport can never be taken away from him. The WEC belt, the Showtime kick, the UFC belt, the UFC finishes, the Wheaties box. But I think we can all agree that he's been hit or miss since the RDA fight. And the difference in the way Pettis and Cerrone lose is, we all know Cerrone is a slow starter. And if the Cowboy doesn't get the old engine revving fast enough, he'll lose to a quick starter in the first round. With Pettis, it's a little bit different. Pettis will take the whooping for pretty much an entire fight, minus, a few kicks, a cartwheel kick here and there, a Superman punch, stuff like that. The Barboza, Holloway, Poirier, Ferguson, Diaz, and Diego Ferreira fights were all extremely one-sided. So Pettis needs to get off to a quick start, but my biggest question here is, can he consistently do enough damage to Cowboy? Because he's going to need to win this fight. And again, this ain't the jumping off the cage Pettis that fought Cowboy the first time 7 years ago. And we all know every fight is different. And I like the short notice for Cowboy Cerrone. I like the fact that there's no audience. It's not, there's always pressure with every fight, but it's not that, McGregor fight week pressure. And I'll take it a step further. I know that Cowboy Cerrone's coming off 3 straight losses, but I would personally argue that he would have lost to Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, and Conor McGregor at any point throughout his career. So I actually think this is a good spot for Cowboy to come out here and avenge the loss. I think if he avoids taking a fight-ending blow in the early going, he will eventually begin to take over the fight, mix in takedowns along the way, and either edge a decision or finish Pettis along the way. So I think this fight should be a pick-em. So I'm going with Donald Cowboy Cerrone to avenge that brutal loss to Anthony Pettis here in Jacksonville, Florida, Shaq.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things, man. I think people are kind of overblowing this whole, interview he had, last week. It's Cowboy, guys. The guy takes an ass whooping and comes back all the time, man.
And hasn't he been saying that shit for years, too?
You said what?
Hasn't he been saying shit like that for years?
Yeah, I really look into it that much. When Pettis' last fight, I kind of went in on him. I did bet on Diego Ferreira, and the reasons why I said, man, this guy hasn't evolved, and I just don't think he's tough, man. I think, I said some other things that he was the biggest, in MMA, but I just think that Showtime Pettis is pretty much has nothing sustainable. I think he's a flashy fighter. Of course he can. I think all he has is the flashy finish. If he comes out here and catches Cowboy with a head kick and Cowboy goes down, then hey, props to him. But if this fight hits round 2, or if Cowboy does what he should do, which my boy Saif Saud did, which I kind of figured he was going to do, like Poirier did, and Ferguson didn't really do it, but just come out here and shoot a double leg on the kid and sink his heart. I think he should. Honestly, I think he should dominate Pettis, man. I know he's coming off 3 losses, but what do you think Gaethje would do to Showtime Pettis, man? He would absolutely knock his head off into the 5th row, or we already saw what Ferguson did to him. And then what about the Nate Diaz performance he had was one of the worst performances I've ever seen, ever, man. I thought that was a horrendous performance. I thought he got beat up to a point by a guy that arguably looked slow and sloppy, and he was gassed out 2 minutes into that fight, man. So I think that people are overreading this a little bit. Of course, Showtime did knock out Wonder Boy, and this and that. He submitted Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa damn near had to go to the hospital the day before the fight. But I think that Pettis is. I think I got respect for the legend. So when I say these things, don't read into them too much. I think he's accomplished a lot of good things, but man, I really think he's soft in 2020, man. I think that he's got nothing sustainable. I think Cowboy Cerrone, if Cowboy Cerrone can just get to the second round, kind of similar to the Hernandez fight, I think you're gonna really start to. And I just don't think he should have anything to fear here, man. He's not in a on a on one of the biggest pay-per-views here, with McGregor, or fighting a young Lions like Gaethje and Ferguson, who's on a 12-fight win streak. Man, I think he should come out here, feel safe. The crowd ain't gonna be cheering. I think he should have less things going through his head. And I mean, this whole, retirement's near. Retirement's near for both of them, man. Trust me on that on Pettis, man. Pettis, I don't think Pettis really wants to necessarily fight, man. I just think Pettis is interested in making some money for his businesses, and I think that of course he loves to fight, and he'll do it, but there's no, this is just a fun thing for him now, man. Similar with Cerrone, but I still think Cerrone has a little bit more pride about himself, man. As you can see by the I mean, I know the fight got stopped in the Ferguson when he blew his nose, but there's been countless amount of times where Showtime Pettis has gone out there and quit the Poirier fight, the Ferguson fight. Oh, I broke my hand. Oh, this and that, man. So I think if he can get to the second round, I think this is Cowboys' fight for the taking. So I'm gonna go with Cerrone to win a 29-27 decision. Pettis might, Cerrone might. He's a slow starter. He kind of looks a little shitty in the early rounds, but man, if he can just settle in and get to the second round, I think the Muay Thai kickboxing is gonna come into factor here, and Pettis is gonna start backing up like he always does, looking for a home run shot. And I really hope Cowboy just plays this smart and decides to wrestle the kid, because if he does that, then I see it being a landslide victory.
And I heard a rumor, I don't know if there's any truth to this, that this is actually Anthony Pettis' last fight on his contract. So there's a chance he may be joining his brother in Bellator soon. I know they definitely want that. So time for the main card. Heavyweight division. We got a matchup between Greg Hardy. He's 5-2. Between you and me, Shaq, he's 7-1. And Yorgan DeCastro is 6-0. Currently, they got Greg Hardy minus 210. The comeback on Yorgan DeCastro is plus 175. Shaq, I like both these guys. They've both come a long way in my eyes. I mean, we've seen Greg Hardy since his pro debut on Contender Series compared to his last fight where he went the full 3-round distance with the number 5 heavyweight on planet Earth. I feel like he's been progressing with Yorgan DeCastro. I'm a fan of his too. I mean, he cashed a nice underdog bet for me against Justin Tafa. This is a completely different matchup. Who you got?
Yeah, this is another one of the more intriguing ones because, I kind of have a hard time really gauging where DeCastro's really at, man. I think that his two performances that we've seen, the Alton Meeks fight where he blasted him with the low kicks. I mean, for a big belly guy, man, he's definitely athletic. And then the fight with Tafa, Tafa squared his stance moving forward. Tafa is a young kid, 4-0, made a fatal mistake and paid the price for it. Hardy, on the other hand, is more so of what I call a self-inflictor. Hardy is, his own worst enemy. And I think that the one thing I can say about Hardy, man, is, compared to the beginning of his career where he had just come out here and rush things. I mean, now he's kind of fighting like a point fighter now, man. He's kind of coming out here. He's popping the jab. He's staying patient. The Sasali fight, man, even though it's Ben Sasali and Ben Sasali's, a bottom dweller of the heavyweight division, the first 2 rounds is a very good. It's just that Greg I think he's a little bit mentally weak. I think that, that inhaler thing was just a sign of that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of his coach's fault as well, man. How can you let the guy use an inhaler in a fist fight? But man, I don't want to say, because I think that Greg has just been rushed up in a spot where he hasn't been ready for, but his athletic traits, can get him by. But I think that the skills are improving. His approach to MMA, he's learning. I mean, obviously, to me, just to the fact that he went 3 rounds, and I know he got absolutely tortured by Drago Volkov. I mean, a lot of, Fabricio, I don't like using MMA math, but Fabricio Werdum couldn't withstand that torture, you know what I'm saying? I think that Greg is definitely improving. It's just, I think that this fight is really going to determine whether Greg is more so, just a hit or miss, but if he wins this fight, man, this will really solidify him. And DeCastro he's still a mystery to me, man, because I like the Tafa fight. I definitely think he's got good timing, good right kicks. And I'm interested to see what happens if he can, get off on some leg kicks on Greg. But what I noticed in that Tafa fight, man, after some clinch exchanges, man, he kind of was looking a little bit tired, man. So I think that I have a feeling, even though Greg used an inhaler in the middle of a fight, I have a feeling that DeCastro can slow down. I have a feeling that in the late rounds he can be really gassed, and I think that if Greg can avoid that big bomb from DeCastro and get this into the late rounds and use that. I think he's got a 6-inch reach advantage in this fight, if I'm not mistaken. He's got an 80-inch reach and pops that jab and, makes Yorgan, use a lot of energy. I think he can possibly outclass Yorgan De Castro. But, man, I like De Castro's energy. I like his story. These guys from these poor countries, man, they got a lot of heart, a lot of spirit. So it wouldn't shock me. It's heavyweight as well. But, man, I got to go with Greg. I just think that if Greg continues to learn more about the sport, and I know he's having these crazy results and these mixed results, but I really like from going from a guy that just came out and rushed a bunch of fights, and then to now, like, he's like actually the first 2 rounds of the Sosali fight, like actually executing a really good game plan with the jab and moving around. And in the Volkov fight, I didn't think it was a bad performance either, man. I thought he hung in there. He broke his hand in that fight, and he hit Volkov with some shots as well. I think that Greg still got the higher ceiling, and I know that a lot of people are saying he's a complete fraud, and which might be the case if he gets knocked out, but because I have a feeling that DeCastro is one of these guys that might be able to rise to the occasion, man. He's from a very small country and he's got a lot of pride. But I'm gonna go with Hardy, man. I just think that the 6-inch reach advantage, and even though I don't know this 100%, I just have a feeling that if DeCastro gets into the late rounds, that he's gonna start to slow down. So I'm gonna go with Greg Hardy.
Yeah, look, DeCastro, obviously, I like the guy for the reasons I mentioned. He did come through for me against Tafa. But more than that, man, if you look at his amateur history, the guy actually had a losing amateur record, interestingly enough. And then he moved to Boston, and now he's really been doing his thing, man. And also that Contender Series fight, he actually fought NFC veteran Alton Meeks, who we saw win a fight in the NFC. And DeCastro ran through that guy. The leg kicks were thunderous. The guy kicks like a mule. Then obviously you saw his hands in the Tafa fight. But with Hardy, like I already mentioned, we've literally seen his entire MMA pro career. I mean, we saw his debut on Contender Series compared to his last fight where he went 3 rounds with the number 5 guy on planet Earth. And Shaq, I actually thought he looked really good in that first round, but then he broke his hand and kind of got picked apart the next 2. But if that first round was any indication of future performances, I think that this guy does have a bright future. I love the fact that he's popping that jab, the footwork. He's so athletic, and he's not rushing things like he was early on in his career. He's starting to be more patient. I feel like he is starting to learn the game. I like Yorgan's mindset. I like, his story is amazing. The guy seems like a really cool dude, and I think that he's going to have a long career, but I'm going to go with Hardy here. I think the athleticism will be too much, the size, even the UFC experience at this point. So I'm going to go with Greg Hardy to get this done. Now, next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Jeremy Lil Heathen Stevens, he's 28-17, and Calvin the Boston finisher Kattar is 20-4. Currently, they got Calvin Kattar minus 250. The comeback on Jeremy Stevens is plus 210. Well, Shaq, look, I really wish this was line to pick him like that Yair Rodriguez fight, or plus 105 Calvin like Yair was. But I think people have kind of smartened up and they realize that it's the same Jeremy Stevens it's always been. And people keep mentioning that Jeremy needs to come out here and use his leg kicks to win this fight. Look, firstly, Jeremy's nowhere near as fast as Moicano, who beat Stevens too, by the way. I think if Jeremy tries to come out here with a leg kick game plan, he's going to get countered with a straight right down the pipe. I think he's too slow to come out here and do that. But the thing that makes this fight interesting for me is that Calvin loves to stand in the pocket and trade, and that's like the one area where Jeremy has a chance. So Jeremy will have the chance to land that one big blow throughout the fight. It's just I personally don't think he's going to, but there are openings. Sometimes Calvin likes to throw that uppercut. Hook counters are definitely open. We've seen it, throughout his career. But Calvin's the sharper guy, the longer guy, the faster guy, the more athletic guy, the guy that has, more left in the tank, in my opinion. He's just better than Jeremy Stevens. But once again, he's going to give Jeremy the kind of fight he wants. Like, I don't think Calvin's going to come out here and shoot takedowns or, do any shit like that. I think he's going to stand and bang with Jeremy Stevens. And I simply think he's better. I think he's going to pop him with the jab, maybe even mix in leg kicks of his own, which people don't expect. But, I mean, I know you saw some of those kicks he landed against Feely. He's thrown some kicks in his career. People forget about that. But bottom line, I think Calvin's too sharp for Jeremy. It's just he's got to be cautious in this one because his fighting style does present Jeremy with the chance Jeremy needs to win the fight. But I'm going Calvin.
Yeah, he makes some good points. This was another one I thought was interesting because, yeah, I agree. Stevens is, somewhat washed up and, slow and this and that. But, man, I was surprised. I was expecting this to be line like, kind of like him versus Lamas, minus 140, somewhere in that range. But, hey, they came out and had that conviction and Kattar was going to win this fight. And I think he's going to win as well. It's just, I think that Stevens is very durable. I think that he's got very good cardio, very good pressure. And like you said, if it just comes down the pocket skills, I definitely think Kattar is better. But I mean, he is going to try to beat Stevens at a game where most people try to avoid Stevens, and so it's going to be very interesting. I think Calvin's one of the better boxers, but just watching Calvin, this whole top five thing, he ain't no top five guy. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think that Calvin's a bit one dimensional, but that one dimension is definitely elite in my opinion. Is boxing, but I'd like to see Calvin, mix it up a little bit more. Yeah, I kind of feel like there's two different Calvins. I feel like Calvin, that's why I think he's going to win this fight with Stevens because Stevens likes to pressure and move forward a lot. In fights like against Burgos where he had to back up a lot and fights against Fishy where he had to back up a lot, he was able to get the knockouts in those. But when Calvin has to move forward, like how he was kind of chasing Moicano around a little bit, like he was a beat. But those guys aren't a different. Both of those guys beat Stevens, beat Kattar as well. But I think that it could be lined a little bit closer, man. Or maybe I wish it was lined closer, but man, I think that Calvin is not on the level of a Zabit and Yair and. Those guys are super dynamic and, throw a bunch of have an arsenal, an array of kicks. And, as where Calvin is just going to come in here with the hands. Now, his hands are great. It's just, Steven, his back's against the wall. I mean, he's not going to get cut by any means, but I mean, he wants to lose 4 in a row. Has he lost 4 in a row in his career? I know he's lost 3 in a row before, but, 4 in a row, I know he's coming out here hungry for the win, and I can't say Stevens is necessarily done like I can say with a Lam. It's just because the fact that Stevens is still somewhat, at least he's winning a round against some of these guys, but he still hasn't. Stevens is like a vet that he still fights uncomposed at times, man. And he's in there talking with Zabit and you saw how he was acting with Yair, and let's not forget the Jose Aldo fight where he had Jose hurt and then completely lost it and gassed out and got finished with a body shot. Things where I don't think you'll see Calvin do. So I think Calvin actually has the composure edge. I mean, if you beat Calvin, you're just better than him. So I think that I'm gonna pick Calvin for a win, but he needs to come out here with the mindset of taking this to the cards, man. If you look at Stevens records when it goes to the cards, I mean, it's under 500 considerably. So, I think that if Calvin comes out here with that mindset, I think he should get the win here. But, man, I wish it was lying closer to, like, the Lamas fight, man. I'm surprised.
I do as well. Now, heavyweight division, in the featured bout, we got a matchup between Francis Ngannou, he's 14-3, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik is 10-0. Currently, they got Francis Ngannou minus 265. The comeback on Jairzinho Rozenstruik is plus 225. Well, Shaq, it's interesting because a lot of people are saying that this fight is going to be like the Derek Lewis fight. I personally disagree. I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik has a completely different style than Derek Lewis. I think both these guys hit like trucks. You think someone's going to take a canvas nap, or is there a chance this goes the full 3-round distance, Shaq?
Yeah, I know Stipe Miocic is looking forward to this fight. I know he's going to have on, he's going to be at the fire station with his Suriname hat on and a Suriname t-shirt on, cheering for Rozenstruik to come out here and get the upset so he can fight him instead of Ngannou. But you know, um, Francis is the favorite, and rightfully so. He's ever since those two fights that he had, the one with Lewis and Stipe. Uh, I think that we know what happened there, man. Hollywood got to him. His head got to him. I mean, Dana even said it. He said this dude started missing all his treatments. He started missing practices. Like, this dude was flying around the country, and he wasn't even showing up. So I think that he learned his lesson from that. He's definitely looked great. Took out some of the greatest heavyweights of all time along the way, and Curtis Blades. This fight is a little bit risky because Rozenstruik is a guy, man. It's not even his power; it's more so the timing. It's like his jabs are so good, man. I mean, you saw him knock out a guy with a jab, and Arlovsky got knocked out in 29 seconds. And that was based off a jab, man. So Francis, it's one of these games where like Francis, I know he's never utilized this game plan, but I'd almost tell Francis, like, bro, let's just wrestle this fucking guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's not even, because I'm telling you, man, with a guy like Rozenstruik, even though Rozenstruik is prone to some overhand rights as well, he's such an experienced striker that playing a game like that with him is very, very risky, man, because he's got the timing down pat. You don't see many guys that hurt guys with jabs, man. So that's one thing I noticed in this game. But the other parts in this game needs work, man. His clinch game needs work. His wrestling needs work. The Overeem fight, people are saying it was an early stoppage, or if that Overeem was winning, which he was up 3-1, but at the same time the fight's 5 rounds, man. So the fact that Rozenstruik did that, man, I picked him to win that fight, but Rozenstruik's one of these guys, man. He could possibly be like, a guy that we don't see coming. Of course, I like Francis to come out here and get the win. I think he's the better fighter for sure, but I do think he's taken somewhat of a risk in this matchup. But it's not like he had a lot of leverage, and Stipe already said he doesn't want to fight him, so he has to take another fight. It's just, it's going to be a dick measuring contest, man. Francis is going to come out here try to. I don't believe this whole shit that they're going to be scared, man. I like Rozenstruik's energy, but I think Francis is the better fighter, has more tools to win, and I really hope that his coaching staff comes in here with the tie-up game plan and then knock him out, man, because Rozenstruik's clinch game needs a lot of work, and his ground game needs a lot of work as well. I'm sure it's improving. He's at ATT, but that's where I think Ngannou can capitalize. We've seen him hit Kimura's in the past. He submitted Arlovsky, right? Yeah. Anthony Hamilton, my bad. But I do think those things are in his repertoire for him to get the win if he wants an easy win. Now, if he wants to stand out here in space and see whose dick's bigger, and then he's playing with fire, man. Because like Rozenstruik, I think he was like 76-6 in kickboxing with like 50-something knockouts. This guy's timing is really good, and Francis is the hardest hitter in the division, so he can knock out Rozenstruik as well. But it just depends on how he chooses to go about it. I'm going to take Francis, but I don't want to say it's dog or pass, because Francis has been coming out here. But these guys that he's been beating are fucking done, man. We're talking about JDS, fucking the ghost of Cain Velasquez, Curtis Blades, and we always known that he's been scared of Francis his whole life, man. So, I'll take Francis, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, you bring great points about if Francis wants to come out here and, shoot some takedowns or clinch him up, and people are going to be like, well, Francis isn't known for that. Well, is Junior Albini known for his great takedown ability? You know what I mean? And Junior Albini was able to easily take him down. But I got to give Jair Rozenstruik a lot of credit in the sense that even though his takedown defense needs a ton of work, his submission defense seems pretty good. Like, he doesn't freak out on the ground, kind of just, takes his ass whooping like a man, doesn't take too much damage, doesn't, give up the openings for submissions, but at the same time, he's losing rounds off his back. He doesn't get back up either, so it's a double-edged sword. And I like Jair Rozenstruik. Look, I like the fact that he didn't shake Overeem's hand during the face-off. The dude means business. He's a great counter striker. The kick returns are so quick. It's just like muscle memory when the guy does it. The issue, like we mentioned, is the takedown defense. So he's got to worry on that. It might not be too big of a factor here, but Ngannou has been inside the octagon many times now, so I'd love to see him switch things up. But he can't abandon what got him to the dance either, because the sound of the crack when Ngannou lands is unlike anything I've ever seen before in my life. I mean, you cringe when you hear those shots he landed on JDS. I mean, it was just like, oh, man. And this won't be like the Lewis fight for a lot of reasons. Look, he was coming off the Stipe fight when he fought Lewis. His confidence was completely shot. Whereas right now he's on a 3-fight win streak. Confidence is sky high. So I simply think it's a different point in Francis Ngannou's career. And I think he's going to come out here and shine. And I'm not going to be surprised if he actually knocks out the former kickboxer Jair Rozenstruik. Co-main event in the evening in the bantamweight division. We got Henry the Messenger Cejudo, the bantamweight and flyweight champion. He's 15-2, and Dominick Cruz is 20-2. Currently, they got Henry Cejudo minus 230. The comeback on Dominick Cruz is plus 190. Man, I cannot wait for this fight. So, this whole thing about Henry Cejudo calling out legends and people giving him shit for it is absolutely ridiculous. Like, guys, he beat DJ, TJ, and Marlon Moraes. He deserves his choice at a legacy fight. Not to mention the fact that as much as I love Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen, none of those guys have even headlined a fight night, and you want them to get a title shot? Like, guys, stop. They'll get their title shot soon enough. But when you talk about a champ's mindset and championship adjustments, you talk about Henry Cejudo. When you watch that first DJ fight and you compare it to the second fight, I mean, it's night and day. His physicality, his composure, it's not even the same guy. Then he goes out there, beats TJ Dillashaw in record-breaking time. And I thought he made an all-time championship adjustment versus Marlon Moraes. And, Marlon's a guy that you've seen, people will reference how Marlon was getting the better of him early. Have you guys ever watched Marlon Moraes fight before? Aljamain Sterling couldn't overcome those kicks. Jimmy Rivera couldn't eat a clean one and keep walking forward. Rafael Assunção didn't make it out the first round. Then you have Henry Cejudo. He eats every single hard shot from Marlon Moraes, who knocked everyone else the fuck out with those shots. And then it's Henry that puts the pressure on Marlon Moraes and knocks him out. So I think people need to put some respect on Henry Cejudo's name. And listen, his world-class strength and conditioning program from Neuroforce One and Fight Ready. People don't have any clue about Neuroforce One. It's the secret weapon here, and he's had full access to Neuroforce One during this quarantine. And those guys, like, they break the shit down to a science. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And also, since that first DJ fight, what about Henry's distance? What about Cejudo's new stance? I mean, he kind of has that like Patricio Pitbull karate stance, and there's so many myths surrounding this fight. Like, people are saying Henry just laid on Demetrius Johnson. Look, the reality is Henry kept up with the fastest fighter in UFC history on the feet. And Cejudo was keeping up with the super speed of Mighty Mouse, and he did what he had to do to win the fight. Y'all know wrestling is allowed in MMA, right? So, if DJ is really the GOAT, how come he couldn't get up from bottom? And that's no disrespect to DJ. I know he's an amazing fighter, but I just love how everyone conveniently leaves out the fact that Henry badly injured his ankle in the first minute of that fight. The guy rolls over his ankle, he's limping all over the place, and he still dethroned Mighty Mouse Johnson, and y'all want to sit here and discredit him? I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. And look, Dominick Cruz, I'm not going to be one to use the layoff against him. I'm not going to use his age against him. And I also know Cejudo had a shoulder surgery. And Cruz, who's known for always tearing his ACL, had a few upper body surgeries himself. So to me, those are all non-factors when I cap this matchup. Cruz is a former champion, a future Hall of Famer, the innovative footwork that changed the game back in the WEC, his early UFC run. I mean, the angles, the creativity, the fight IQ. It was truly ahead of its time. But Shaq, historically speaking, long reigning champs don't come back to win their belt. And Cruz has already done it once, but there's a huge difference in scenarios. He didn't really lose his belt the first time. He was stripped for inactivity. This time, he's actually coming off losing his belt. And he didn't just lose, Shaq. He got schooled by Cody Garbrandt in a way where people legit thought that was some once-in-a-lifetime athletic performance. No, guys, it was simply the end of an era. Cody Garbrandt dropped Cruz 4 times, and he should have knocked out Cruz on 4 separate occasions, but instead of pouncing and following up, he decides to point to the ground and do the robot. Look, no one ever said Cody Garbrandt was the brightest, but I'll tell you who won't dance around like an idiot if he drops Cruz. That's Henry Cejudo. He will pounce, he will follow up, and come May 9th in Jacksonville, Florida, Henry Cejudo will finish the great Dominick Cruz.
Yeah, man. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I think that all respect. I mean, look, I actually bet on Cruz to come back off the layoff and beat Dillashaw. Because I mean, I know that you know that classic interview where he was telling TJ how fake he was and how he was turning on his brothers. This is when the whole alpha male TJ thing was going down. And that was a good point. I mean, he never lost his belt, man. And I like how people are, just shoving the last fight to the side like it never happened, or that was smart Garbrandt, or that was the good Garbrandt. Guys, Garbrandt was acting like a fucking idiot the entire time. It's just Cruz was acting like more of an idiot. I mean, in the lead up to the fight, he was acting more like an idiot. At the face-offs, he was acting more like an idiot. And in the fight, he got super emotional. He got carried away. And when those type of things happen, man, that can make or shape the landscape of your career. And to be honest with you, man, he comes back and he, wins the first 3 rounds against Dillashaw. I think Dillashaw was really red-zoned, redlining in that fight. I mean, he was just angry and fought emotional the first 3 rounds. But we saw what happened in the last 2 rounds. He was able to start tracking him down and really hurting Cruz with some low kicks. And you can see Cruz's body start to fail on him, man. And then you go in the Faber fight. I mean, real quick, what's Faber's? Is Faber a threat in a title fight? I mean, what's Faber's record in title fights? It's fucking way under 500, man. So fucking. And then we go into the Garbrandt fight, and I think Cruz got so emotionally carried away in that fight to a point that I don't think he's ever going to be able to recover. Now he's coming off another 3-year layoff, and it's one thing to come back, but I really think he should have took a tune-up fight first, man. But I understand, man, when you win as much as he does, and you're a long-reigning champ. Sometimes you're in denial, man. It's like a Weidman, a Joanna, it's a. They can't. I'm a champion. I didn't really lose. They don't understand. And I think Cruz is in way over his head in this fight, man. I think that Henry Cejudo is an all-time great. Like you said, to just shove aside what he's done in these last 3 fights is one of the most foolhardy things I've ever come across in my entire life. I mean, Demetrius Johnson was out here dominating guys to a point where, I mean, no one ever thought he was gonna lose, and just the fact that he, people are gonna counteract me and say, "Oh, did you not see what Dominick did to DJ?" Come on, guys. So if we're gonna sit here and act like that was the same fight, I know they have the same name, but sit here and act like those 2 guys are the same fighter, man, like. I think people really need to just take their disdain from the king of cringe and, and the antics and all these other things and just face the facts that this is an all-time great that we have on our hands. I think Henry Cejudo, man, the improvements, like you said, with the karate stance, ever since he started training with the Pitbull brothers, I mean, now he's coming out here using his distance. He's sniping these guys off. Whether TJ Dilla, I mean, bro, he knocked out he knocked out Ipo Shaw, a guy filled with fucking injectable EPO inside of him, and he knocked him out in 32 seconds. I mean, the amount of EPO he had in him, he should have been able to keep going, but Henry Cejudo's fucking too much of a dog. He's got too much power in his hands, and Cruz isn't giving him enough credit. I mean, I heard an interview 7 months ago where Cruz was saying Henry's still green and he hasn't fought anybody, and quote unquote Marais gasses out, bro. If Marais kicked one of them little chicken legs of yours, bro, I don't know if you would be able to fucking stand. Like, I really don't, man. I think that people aren't giving him enough credit for that win over Marlon Moraes. I mean, I know, this fight with Peter Yan hasn't happened, but man, Marlon Moraes is a scary motherfucker with those kicks, man. And I think 90-something% of the guys in the division. Hey, didn't Marlon Moraes just beat the great Jose Aldo? And didn't he suck it up in the third round and win too? Like, this whole Moraes gasses out thing, like, come on, bro. I think Dominick Cruz is in complete denial. I think he's in way over his head. Like you said, he got dropped 4 times against Garbrandt. And the Faber fight, man, really wasn't that impressive. There was a part in the 4th round where I actually thought Cruz kind of got wobbled a little bit. But Uriah Faber's an old man who was coming off a win where he barely got by Frankie Saenz, bro. And then. So I think that Dominick Cruz is just another case of the times have passed him by. I think this was a smart call out from Henry. I think this is a tune-up fight for Henry. I think this is the easiest fight that he's had in a while. And when we consider the last 3 opponents, all those other guys were active. I think Cruz's timing is going to be off. I think his speed's going to be off. I think Henry's going to be healthy. The power, just the pressure, the dog. Not saying that Cruz isn't these things, but I just don't think Cruz is going to be able to fight at the level that he thinks he's going to fight at, man. I think that he should have took one, if he would have came and fought a Aljamain or a Jimmy Rivera like he was supposed to, but he broke his arm, I just think that Henry Cejudo will put Dominick Cruz down within 2 rounds. And he's going to be the first guy to stop him with strikes. Cody Garbrandt could have been the first guy, but Cody was an idiot, guys. No, Cody was in there dancing and doing the fucking I don't even know what that shit's called. Looking like one of the Jabberwockies or something. You know what I'm saying? So I just think Cruz is in over his head. He doesn't know what he's getting himself into on Saturday night. All-time legend. I'm a huge Cruz fan, man. But Henry Cejudo was an all-time great that we have on our hands, and the fact that people are saying that he's avoiding, he's trying to take easy fights, because the original matchup was Jose Aldo. Like, bro, Jose Aldo ain't no easy fight, And like you said in the beginning, Aljamain Sterling has Aljamain Sterling even been on the main card of a pay-per-view? Like, bro, I like the kid. I think he's improved a lot, but come on. Like, Aljamain can't beat Henry, guys. You kidding me? And Corey Sandhagen, I like the kid. I think he's a future title challenger, but bro, he ain't been on no pay-per-view yet. Peter Yan's been on a pay-per-view, so Yan's the closest one. And if Yan takes care of Moraes, then the title shot's his. But bro, Peter Yan ain't main evented a card yet, bro. Like, you can't just throw these guys on a pay-per-view. I think this fight makes all the sense, man. This is a strategic planning by Captain Eric and Henry. I think they come out here and continue on that legacy and run through Dominick Cruz.
Man, I'm very excited for that fight. Main event of the evening. For the interim lightweight belt, you got Tony El Cucuy Ferguson. He's 25-3, and Justin the Highlight Gaethje is 21-2. Currently, they got Tony Ferguson minus 185. The comeback on Justin Gaethje is plus 160. Shaq, it's an interesting fight, man. Look, just to give you an idea of Tony Ferguson's work ethic, I'll be chilling on IG at midnight, getting ready to go to bed, and guess who's going live at that time, hitting the speed bag and the jump rope, Tony Ferguson. This guy is a workhorse, and when he says champ shit only, he truly means it. And I feel like this little moment I'm referencing, like going, on IG at 1 a.m. and you see the guy still working, it truly exemplifies this guy's champ mentality. And Tony's pace is absolutely insane. I mean, he'll walk forward the entire time. And obviously, we've known about his hands since back on Tough, but what about this dude's front kicks? It's like a stab to the gut. And we also got to mention the footwork. He's consistently switching stances and giving his opponents all kinds of looks and different attacks to be worried about. And when people talk about his unorthodox training methods, I feel like they need to take their fan caps off and realize that he's only showing you what he wants you to see. He could just be having some fun days. Look, this ain't no Diego Sanchez with yes cartwheels and the guru coach massage therapist weirdo. Ferguson's the real deal. Longest win streak in lightweight history. Look, one doesn't simply go on a 12-fight win streak in the deepest division in the sport without being of champ shit only lineage. And how come no one talks about how Tony Ferguson threw a Showtime Superman punch at Anthony Pettis? How come no one talks about that Tony Ferguson was salsa dancing in the middle of a 25-minute cage fight in Mexico City Elevation versus Rafael Dos Anjos? I truly believe Tony Ferguson is one of the most underrated fighters on the entire roster, and he's ranked number 1. Now, for everything I love about his game, the elbows, the jiu-jitsu, the confidence, I do worry that at times when he's teeing off on his opponents, sometimes the chin does tend to lift in the air a bit, and against a serious hitter like Justin Gaethje, that could come back to bite him in the ass. He needs to not eat one of those nukes to the chin to stay in this fight and win it, because look, Gaethje's power doesn't discriminate. And Justin Gaethje, look, every single fight this man has taken part in inside the octagon has ended via knockout with a performance bonus. And Gaethje has an 100% bonus rate, which is just an amazing thing. Justin Gaethje sent out a tweet a while back saying, Tony, take me to that dark place of yours. And I think it's safe to say Saturday night in Jacksonville, Florida, Tony Ferguson will take Justin Gaethje to that dark place of his. And Gaethje used to want to be the most exciting fighter in the world, but now he wants to be a world champion. And that's a really scary thing. But the last point I want to make here, Shaq, is not to discredit any of Gaethje's performances. The guy is absolutely unbelievable, and I do believe he will hold the belt one day. But these last few guys he's fought, look, Barboza and Cowboy, as much as I love both those guys, they're stationary targets. Not to mention Tony finished them both too, but they're both stationary targets. Tony is not a stationary target. Tony switches his stance. He's always moving with that footwork. So I don't think he's going to be as readily available for the nuke. And while I do think he's going to get caught with some big ones along the way, I don't think it's going to be just that easy target like Barboza was. And, I know Vic's not a stationary target, but look, as much as I love Vic isn't a top 5 guy. That's just the bottom line. Now we're dealing with the creme de la creme of the lightweight division. And I love Justin Gaethje. When you see a plus 160 next to his name, I mean, I understand why people would take that shot. The only issue is, I know for me personally, if I have money against Tony Ferguson, Shaq, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. on fight day in a cold sweat knowing that I got money against the boogeyman, and I want no part of that. That guy will haunt your dreams. But on a serious note, I think if he does get past this early going, doesn't eat that concussive blow that puts him out, I think he's going to start to pick apart Justin Gaethje. I think those front kicks to the gut, the jabs, the boxing, the body shots, I think Tony Ferguson is going to drown the very exciting Justin Gaethje in the late rounds. But, obviously the early knockout is always a factor for Gaethje. And I've seen Gaethje drown guys in deep waters in the World Series of Fighting too. So I think his cardio will work in the late rounds as well. But I think Ferguson is, I think this is Ferguson's time right now. I think Gaethje will touch the belt one day, not Saturday. I'm going Ferguson to win the interim belt once again and finally get that match with Khabib.
Yeah, man, this is it's a great matchup, man, because you make some good points there, saying Gaethje, his last opponents, Cerrone and Barboza being guys that Ferguson finished as well, and and that's factual. And those guys, all these guys, he definitely took care of before, and Ferguson, he moves forward. What I'm struggling with this, man, I know Ferguson's got the rep of this, drowning guys, but to be honest, man, this last, to be honest, I think he's been drowning a bunch of mental midgets, man. I think that, Kevin Lee, it was not ready for no title. That's who he got his first interim belt off beating. I know he was hot at the time. He had beat Mike Chiesa, but Kevin Lee was not in any way, shape, or form ready for no title fight. Now, he did beat Dos Anjos coming off his title fight. That was a very impressive performance. I think he beat Josh Thompson before that. But, man, I feel as if, like, he he broke Pettis. I mean, congrats, like, like, big fight. He got fucking dropped in that fight. And not to put like too much emphasis on it, but that it did happen. He got dropped by Kevin Lee as well. With the right hand, but those guys don't have any composure. Kevin Lee, like I said, had no business being in a title fight. Anthony Pettis, I mean, who hasn't broke Anthony Pettis? And the Cerrone fight, although I feel as if Ferguson was definitely winning and was good and did win, and we didn't get to see the third round. I mean, I felt like the fight was very competitive, and that is most likely due to his awkward style and his funkiness. But I think that his whole, him drowning and breaking these guys is a little inflated to me. I think he's been, like I said, he's been drowning a bunch of mental midgets, man. Like, bro, oh my God, he drowned Pettis, like, fucking, but I think Gaethje on the other hand, I think early on in his career, when we just talk about the first three fights, Michael Johnson, Alvarez, and Dustin, man, I felt like the guy would kind of be in rush mode a little bit, and that's just kind of comes to getting his feet wet. He's coming over as the hunted guy. He's coming from a different promotion. He was able to take out number 5, Michael Johnson, in his first fight, and Michael Johnson, although Michael Johnson's got 30-something fights and he's lost damn near half of them. I mean, he does have wins over Ferguson and Dustin Poirier and Edson Barbosa as well. But the Eddie and the Dustin fight, man. When going into the Vic fight, when everyone was saying that this kid's done, he will never be anything. To be honest, man, I kind of gained stock for him in those 2 losses, man, because I know the Eddie fight he gassed out, and I think that was he needed to make an adjustment in his style a little bit, in which I definitely see in the last 3 fights, because I think that he is the hardest hitter in the division, and I think that his power is super high percentage. I think that if the guy hits anyone on the chin that makes consistent mistakes in the pocket, that he will knock them the fuck out, man. I think that, and when we talk about Gaethje, we're talking about a guy that really doesn't take any back steps. Now, the Poirier fight and the Alvarez fight, I felt like, those guys kind of showed a little bit of the blueprint, like you were saying with those front kicks of the body, both of those guys were going to Gaethje's body. Alvarez was digging in with some big body shots, Poirier as well. And both those guys had to fight on one leg, and what worries me is what happens if Gaethje starts getting in on those chicken legs of T-Ferg, man. I think that Pettis just doesn't, like I said earlier, doesn't really have anything sustainable to win a fight like that. And I do feel like I don't necessarily think Ferguson is a threat to knock Gaethje out cold. So I think that Gaethje can kind of, people are saying that he's got 2 rounds to get this done, which could be the case. But, man, I really think this fight's on an even playing field, man. Gaethje doesn't take any back steps. Gaethje likes to meet force with force. And in these last 3 fights, I have noticed a change in his approach, kind of like Greg Hardy. Not saying that he's coming out here and he's popping the jab, but I am seeing a guy in the Vic fight that, the Dustin and the Eddie fight, man, he came out super charged up early, and he definitely, I can't say he slowed down in the Poirier fight because he won that 3rd round, I believe it was, but I think that he's sitting back a little bit more. He's picking his shots a little bit better. He's not taking as much. His last 3 fights, you cannot say he's a punching bag. I mean, the first 3 fights, maybe you can say that, but the last 3 fights, you cannot say that at all. And, I mean, let's be honest here. He was the underdog in 2 of those. And every time he's been the underdog, except one time in the UFC, he's won, man. So I think the only time he didn't win is when he was the underdog when he fought Dustin. So. I think that Ferguson is playing with fire in this matchup. I respect him, for coming out here, giving the fans a good show, giving them what they want to see. But I do think that he slowed down a little bit, and I think people are kind of over. I'm not saying that he can't drown guys, but like, like, is there really that much stock in the, drowning a 25-year-old Kevin Lee that's not ready for a title fight? Is there really that much stock in, drowning Anthony Pettis and Donald Cowboy Cerrone? Now, if we're talking about 4 or 5 years ago when he was fighting Edson and Dos Anjos, I think that guy beats Gaethje for sure. But I don't think that we're getting this guy. I think that this guy is a little slower, just not as sharp. And I think that Justin Gaethje is going to knock him out in the first round, man. I think Gaethje is going to come out here, close that distance, and I think you're going to see those consistent mistakes that Ferguson makes in every fight that he gets away with. But I just think that Gaethje is different, man. Gaethje is different than these guys because Gaethje doesn't give a fuck. When you don't have that fear of getting knocked out, when you don't have that fear of, of what's going to happen in a fight, unlike Anthony Showtime Pettis, who is a wounded warrior, and a Cowboy Cerrone, another wounded warrior, and Kevin Staph Infection Lee. I think that it's a good recipe for Gaethje. I see a lot of people are on him, which kind of worries me. But man, this is not the fight I would play Ferguson in, man. Man, maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see him as a threat to necessarily put Gaethje out with one punch, kind of similar to like a Poirier or an Alvarez. I think both those guys have better boxing inside the pocket, But I feel like if Gaethje can fight that phone booth fight that he likes to fight, I really think he could put Ferguson down in one. I think if this guy hits. Ferguson likes to throw a lot of rear uppercuts with his chin sky high, and he does it every single fight, man. But when you're fighting these guys, like I mentioned earlier, man, you'll get away with it. I don't think he gets away with it here. I think he gets knocked out in the first round. So I'm gonna go with Justin Gaethje here, and I think he's gonna become the interim champ.
Man, I'm pumped for this fight. So we got a lot of fan questions, but let's get to them on the next episode because we're gonna have to break down the next two fights. There's one Wednesday and then Saturday, and this whole ordeal. So we'll take care of that on the next episode. It's a little bit of a shorter card, but now, Shaq, we gotta talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So, Shaq, what is your fight to watch for UFC 249?
Yeah, in my opinion, the fight to watch is Henry Cejudo versus Dominick Cruz. I mean, you got two all-time greats. Dominick Cruz, the greatest bantamweight of all time. Henry Cejudo, one of the it might be the greatest combat. The Olympic gold medalist, the former flyweight champ, the current UFC bantamweight champ, Triple C. These guys have had a long rivalry, allegedly dating back to their high school days. Henry says that Cruz was always jealous of him in high school wrestling, and because he was just better than everyone and he'd always win. And I'm really interested to see what happens because if Henry gets this win, man, that'll be wins over Demetrius Johnson, T.J. Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes, the number one contender, and he would have had a serious resume if he gets this win, especially if he can be the first guy to stop Dominick Cruz with strikes. So that's my fight to watch. And if Dominic wins, bro, that would be fucking crazy, man. He'll fucking be a three-time world champ. He's already a Hall of Famer, but if he gets a win, man, that'll be legendary. So, that's my fight to watch.
Yeah, the co-main event's absolutely one of the fights to watch, if not the fight to watch. And normally I don't pick the main event for fight to watch, but guys, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, 17 combined performance bonuses between these two guys. 10 bonuses for Tony, 7 from Justin. 7 from Justin in 6 fights, just to let y'all know. So I fully expect both these guys to walk out 50K, maybe 100K richer in addition to their salaries, and hopefully they negotiated some pay-per-view points too. So I'm hoping both these guys get paid handsomely on Saturday night and give us an all-time classic. Now, Shaq, who is your fighter to watch for UFC 249?
Yeah, my fighter to watch is gonna be Justin Gaethje, man. I'm gonna go with Gaethje just because the fact that, man, the complete switch around. Like, I remember a few last year around this time where people were saying they don't know how many fights he has left in him. He only had like 3 UFC fights, and going into the big fight, I was telling people, man, they are severely underestimating this guy. And just the fact that he came in from that different promotion where it was called the C League, and he was fighting dudes like Baboon Palomino and Brian Foster and Busca Pay, shit like that, where he was still getting rocked in pretty much every fight. Just if he came out here and actually won an interim UFC belt, I think that would be one of the best signings that the UFC has ever made. Is guaranteed 50K with this guy, guaranteed chaos with this guy. Same thing with Ferguson. But if Gaethje comes out here and wins the belt, I feel like that would almost be like one of the best runs from him to start off 1-2, then to string off 4 wins, potentially all 4 by vicious KO. So I think that he's my fighter to watch, and I'm excited.
Definitely. For me, my fighter to watch is Calvin Kattar. Look, this is a guy, I've been singing his praises for a long time, and if you want to be top 10 in the featherweight division, you better go out there and beat a guy like Jeremy Stephens. And the reason it's so interesting is because of the line. I actually personally thought it was wide, even though I do favor Calvin Kattar to win this fight. I was hoping it was plus 105, minus 110, like Yair was, but it's not. It's minus 250. They think he's going to come out here and soundly beat him, and I won't put that past Kattar to do so. So I hope he proves all the talk I've been giving him, all the praise I've been throwing his way, goes out there and beats Jeremy Stephens. So for that reason, Calvin Kattar is my fighter to watch. Well, Shaq, we did it. It's going down this Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida. UFC 249 live on pay-per-view, Gaethje versus Ferguson. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. They can follow you at MMA Genius 05. They can get our plays at bestfightpicks.com. Use the promo code SHAQ50, all lowercase, for 50% off Shaq's plays. It is max bet season this week. You can use my code Dan for 10% off, or our combined code 2020 for 20% off our VIPs. Go to bestfightpicks.com for that. It is max bet season this week. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places where we are available. We will be back next week twice to break down both of those cards. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.